Loading. Here we
There
go.
it is. All right. So I'm Austin Rollins with Victoria Jacobson here. I said your name right, Jacobson. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, and then we have on here part 2, questions 9 and 10. We'll just go ahead and start out with 9, and then we'll read 10 after. So basically, this question, we're just supposed to get a summary of discrete genes are inherited. George Mendel, kind of a summary of the reading we had online. Well, George Mendel, he was a monk in the 1850s. And there were monks that studied science, I guess. And he did this experiment that we would come to know later as dominant and recessive alleles. He kind of discovered these. He noticed, a very broad generalization of his experiment is he had wrinkled and smooth peas, and he thought that when he would blend those together and create another generation, that they would kind of blend and their traits would just kind of mix together. But instead, they would just get generations where they would just be smooth or just be wrinkled, which kind of describes dominant and recessive alleles and how they propagate throughout generations. So that was his big discovery, is that that's how genes work. You express one, but you can hold another. Victoria, is there anything you want to add?
So the relevance of Mendel's discoveries for evolution is basically alleles, as they later became known. And kind of like the website that we were reading talks about, heredity is a huge part of evolution, and the variation, like the basis of what natural selection and what like continue on from one generation to another, and that's what species. So that was kind of like the main contribution to evolution.
Sweet. Perfect. And then we'll go on to question 10, which is giving a summary about natural selection and Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace and how they kind of contributed to natural selection. So I think Victoria is going to talk a little bit about it first, and then I'll talk.
Yeah, so they worked together, and Darwin kind of like was building his evidence for evolution between 1830 and 1850. Darwin's main focus was like natural selection, and Wallace studied the wild together and corresponded, and they started studying survival of the fittest, that theory, and how was involved in that. And because the pressure of population growth was proposed by Thomas Malthus years before them, and they read that, and also happened with all species, that the strongest will continue on into the generation, and that's what natural selection was.
Yeah, totally.
I can explain is relevant to evolution.
Yeah. I would just add, kind of how Darwin figured that out. He was in a place called the Galapagos Islands, and as he traveled from island to island, which they were close together, separated by water, he noticed that the finches, the birds there, even though they're the same type of bird, they had different types of beaks. There were different species of finches. And you come to realize that they just, by the food they eat, the type of food, whether it was like a nut or a worm or whatever it was, their beaks would change to according to what food was more prevalent on that island. So that's kind of what he got his idea going, it looks like, on this idea of natural selection, which really is evolution. I think that's, this is a huge experiment, huge breakthrough, and really how species can change over time. So yeah. Is there anything else you want to add, Victoria? Are we good there?
Um, that answers our question. So.
Sweet.
All right.